You are welcome to yet another episode of HN What's Your Say? The #1 listening show, where we discuss real issues with real people like you. We are still featuring R. Kelly. Real name Robert Sylvester Kelly. Also known as the R&B King. In the often complicated world of civil litigation and asset recovery, there are battles that play out quietly in courtrooms and legal filings far from the glare of cameras and public opinion. These are battles over money, over claims, over debts owed and over judgments rendered. And for those who believe justice is a straight line, cases like these prove how winding and conflicted the road can be. Today, we're going to take you through one such legal matter, the heated, convoluted and highly consequential fight over R. Kelly's royalties. A fight where accusers, creditors and legal adversaries all scrambled to lay claim to what was left of a once dominant music empire. Let's start at the core of this legal mess. In the aftermath of a series of accusations and lawsuits, multiple parties began moving swiftly to seize R. Kelly's remaining financial assets. Chief among those assets were his music royalties. Payments collected by his record label Sony Music for streams, purchases, radio plays and other uses of his extensive music catalog. Two of the most prominent parties in this race were Heather Williams and Midwest Commercial Funding. Their claims, while both financial in nature, stemmed from very different circumstances. And the legal maneuvering that followed would serve as a striking example of how courts decide who gets paid, when and how much. Heather Williams, a woman who had brought forth abuse allegations against Kelly, was awarded a $4 million judgment in a civil lawsuit. Notably, this judgment was granted in what's known as a default judgment, meaning it was rendered in Kelly's absence from court. Under Illinois law, as with many states, if a defendant does not appear or respond to a lawsuit, the plaintiff can request a default judgment. The court then rules based on the plaintiff's claims alone without the defendant's side being presented. In this case, R. Kelly did not appear to defend himself in the civil suit brought by Williams, resulting in the court awarding her $4 million. On paper, though, it seemed like a swift legal victory. But as we'll see, default judgments carry their own vulnerabilities, particularly when challenged at a later date or when claimants move to enforce them through asset seizures. On the other side of the financial scramble was Midwest Commercial Funding. Their claim, rooted in a commercial lease agreement seeking over $3.5 million in unpaid rent connected to a Chicago property R. Kelly had once leased for his recording and personal use. This was not an abuse allegation or personal injury claim, but a straightforward business debt case. Once again, with Kelly's finances under heavy strain and legal representation spread thin across multiple criminal and civil cases, Midwest moved in to collect. And just like Williams, they set their sights on Kelly's music royalties held in trust by Sony Music as a prime source of recovery. In civil collections law, when a creditor has a valid judgment, they can file what's called a citation to discover assets, followed by a garnishment action. This essentially asks a third party, in this case Sony Music, to freeze and surrender funds due to the debtor, in this case R. Kelly. Both Heather Williams and Midwest filed garnishment actions against Sony Music. What followed was a battle not just for money, but for priority legal standing to determine who would be first in line to collect. This is a crucial aspect many casual observers miss. In debt collection, it's often not just about who is owed money, but about who gets paid first when funds are limited. At the heart of the dispute was the timing of their legal filings and the validity of their claims. Williams, having secured a $4 million default judgment, moved to garnish the royalties. Midwest, with a judgment exceeding $3.5 million, also sought to do the same. According to Illinois law, the party whose garnishment citation is served first typically secures priority over available funds. But this isn't always automatic, as other factors, including legal challenges to the underlying judgment and procedural errors, can upset that order. Now here's where the story takes a significant turn. Despite Williams moving first and initially securing priority, her default judgment would eventually face scrutiny. As R. Kelly's legal team mobilized to challenge various civil judgments in light of procedural and constitutional issues, Williams' $4 million default judgment was brought into question. After legal filings, appeals and reconsiderations, The court ultimately vacated and overturned the insane default judgment against R. Kelly. This meant that the malicious $4 million claim, at least in its original form, was no longer enforceable. Why was it vacated? The reasons cited pointed to procedural defects and concerns about due process. In legal terms, a default judgment is not inherently final. A defendant has the right to petition the court to reopen a case if they can demonstrate a legitimate reason for their absence and present a meritorious defense. In this case, the court agreed to set aside the judgment, effectively erasing Williams' $4 million claim, at least for the time being, from the pool of debts chasing R. Kelly's royalties. With Williams' judgment vacated, her priority claim on Kelly's royalties vanished. That left Midwest Commercial Funding still pursuing their $3.5 million debt claim. And though their legal strategy didn't rest on personal allegations or abuse claims, it nonetheless demonstrated the harsh financial reality Kelly was facing as business creditors moved to collect whatever assets they could from a rapidly shrinking pie. This entire episode also highlights a broader truth about civil asset recovery. It's not about who makes the loudest moral argument, but about who follows legal procedures correctly, files timely, and secures enforceable judgments. The moral dimensions of any underlying allegations, while important in a public sense, do not dictate priority in financial collections law, standard that was not necessarily followed when it came to the several trials R. Kelly was subjected to. In Kelly's case, creditors and claimants rushed to stake their claim on royalties through a cold procedural legal process governed by citations, garnishments, and judgment enforcement statutes. It was not a court of public opinion. It was a matter of who got the paperwork right and who maintained a legally valid claim. And in the end, what remained was a financial free-for-all, with creditors vying for pieces of a once lucrative music career. Those royalties, built over decades of chart-topping hits, collaborations, and global performances, were now being picked apart by civil judgments, business debts, and garnishment orders in what looked like a modern-day gold rush. The case of Heather Williams and Midwest Commercial Funding underscores the legal reality that in America's civil court system, due process and procedural accuracy are paramount. Even in emotionally charged cases, default judgments can be challenged, vacated, and re-examined. And financial priority is determined not by the nature of the claim but by the sequence and validity of legal actions taken. If the same legal standards of blind justice had been followed throughout R. Kelly's trials, perhaps we wouldn't be having this conversation, because the RICO, Mann Act, and forced labor charges would not have applied. Likewise, the Chicago cases would have been disqualified in reference to the statutes of limitations that existed at the time the alleged events may have happened. By this time, R. Kelly would already be a free man. As R. Kelly's legal battles continued on multiple fronts, the fight over his royalties offered a stark illustration of how wealth and reputation can unravel in a tangle of lawsuits and debt claims. It wasn't about his alleged actions anymore. It was always about his money. That is all we had for you today on HN What's Your Say? To keep updated whenever we post a new video, subscribe to this channel now. Also, remember to hit the bell icon and enable notifications. And feel free to share your opinions with us in the comment section below, and let us know if you would like us to publish your views in our next release. We value all our subscribers' opinions.